Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out ProRevenge. Story 1. Dirty Dirty Little Lunch Thief. In the past I have read about dirty little office lunch thieves and have wanted to share mine but had other things going on to post it. This took place when I was still a teen fresh out of university working directly under an engineer. The office I was doing my 4000 HRS in was fairly large, 5 floors of a large office building, a Toronto construction firm. Well, I was lazy and always picked up a lunch from Whole Foods, usually sushi, on my way to work. My floor had its own break room and fridge, and for the first 6 months nothing ever went missing until we got a batch of university office interns in, paid interns. Then wouldn't to know lunches would go missing, and it wasn't just mine. Any lunch in store packaging was gone if there was S name on it or not. Well, after 2 weeks of our lunches just walking away were all getting issued, "Don't fuck with my salmon sashimi." One of the engineers comes up with an idea and asks everyone to throw in a couple of dollars to solve this problem. The following week he sends a text to the store-bought lunch people to meet in the break room before work, and sent a text to everyone in the office to not touch any of the packaged lunches. We meet up and he hands us this little spray bottle to spray the packaging. It was this black light reactive spray. Glows from a black light, but completely undetectable. Lunch rolls around and guess what? Every single packaged lunch is gone. And this guy brings out a bulk light and starts looking for fingerprints. He found them on the door down the hall to the elevator. Now imagine 5 of the super nerdy engineers you have ever seen going down a hallway with a bulk light like something from a discount CSI. Well, there is fingerprints everywhere right up to the elevator on the buttons down to the 2nd floor. Down the hallway at this time I figured some of the interns are nicking our lunches. But I was wrong. We followed it right to the head of the sales department's desk. And well, we demand to see his hands. They fucking were glowing like crazy. Not to mention he had touched his face, so there was this glowing mess covering his face. The guy knew he was caught and we made an agreement not to go to HR but to get a picture and pizza for our floor every Friday for 2 months. We stayed extra that day to print out the glowing mess that was his face. We printed at least 100 of them with the caption "Dirty Dirty Lunch Thief." Those damn things went up everywhere. The bathrooms, all the entryways of the building, every office door and desk in sight. Needless to say, the lunches stopped going missing and I was able to eat my sushi in peace. Edit. English is not my first language and typed on my phone. Edit. I worked there for 2 years after this. The guy never got fired or punished but did get made fun of and received the nickname of the lunch thief. Edit. I don't think I was clear. We took a picture of his face under the black light glowing like he just left a bukkake party and posted the photos all over the office. Edit. I'll also like to add I know I was 100% a diversity hire. Asian English as a second language, young and a woman. They have a quota on hiring us minorities and might as well check as many boxes as you can. Story 2. Friend Crank called me at my job, so I had him served with a fake paternity suit at his. 10 years ago a friend of mine, Crank, called me several times in my office over the course of a day. I decided in that moment that 1. This would not stand, and 2. Rather than entering into a long, protracted quagmire of a prank war, I would use the nuclear option and end it immediately. My friend Mike was a well-known local bartender. I worked at the same bar as a bouncer, and he was very much enjoying single life at the time, facts which I knew I could take advantage of. Soon a plan began to form. I would have him served with a fake paternity suit while he was working at the bar. So, I compiled a ton of free online legal documents, not just for the paternity suit but also income disclosure forms, statements of parental rights, and suggested visitation schedules pending demonstrable proof of sobriety. I filled out all the forms, then smeared what looked like date-received stamps as proof they had been filed and ran copies to make those stamps even more illegible. From there, I crafted a backstory to be included in a cover letter from the fictional mother's fake law firm, the nearby City Family Law Center, on letterhead and all. The mother was an Irish exchange student visiting the area the previous summer. She had only been with Mike, so she knew the baby, Eliza, was his. The cover letter encouraged Mike to call during regular office hours to discuss arranging a DNA test to affirm paternity, I set up a generic voicemail for the number listed as the office on the letterhead. By the end, the paperwork was somewhere between 20 to 25 pages. I enlisted another friend not known by Mike to serve the documents and instructed him to do so around 10 p.m. on a Saturday evening. I told him to keep the interaction very simple. I wasn't able to be by the back bar because I knew I would be laughing too hard, but based on eyewitness reports it played out like this. Friend, are you Mike last name? Mike, yes friend, Michael middle name, last name? Mike, yes friend, drops folder on bar Mike, what's that, friend, paternity suit. You've been served turns around and immediately walks out of the bar Mike, yeah that sounds about right. Mike read through the packet, shakily poured himself several drinks, and then ran over to the bar owner, who was aware of the prank, to ask what to do. He also called the number on the letterhead but sadly did not leave a voicemail. After a solid 10 minutes of intense psychological revenge, the owner finally told Mike he should closely read the last page of the packet. On it, in size 2 font it read "Go fuck yourself, Mike." At which point, Mike ran to the front door and punched me in the chest. Epilogue. Several months later, Mike was on a trip across the country. He had left his car at home with his mom who generously had it washed for him. Mike for some reason kept the paternity suit paperwork in his driver's side door. During the course of the car wash, his mother found it and read the entire thing, then called him sobbing in the middle of the night asking why he hadn't told her about her bastard Irish granddaughter. Story 3. You demand we work overtime for free. Enjoy trying to open the store with no employees. First off, on mobile, non-English speaker. Second, unfortunately, this story came back to mind due to the recent death of the hero of the story. Grumpy, you will be missed. I've met Grumpy in Narcotics Anonymous. He volunteered there after they helped him and became my sponsor. Seeing that I was trying to get my shit together, he offered me my first job out of high school. Grumpy was the manager of a store for a company that sold everything you needed to build a house. From cement and bricks, to custom-made cupboards. I started as a loader, filling the trucks that were making deliveries. A little background for the company, it plays an important for later. When they started, back in the early 80s, they sold everything you needed to build a brick-and-mortar home wholesale to professionals. During their first expansion, they got a really good reputation for their prices of power tools, custom cupboards, and landscaping, including custom-made garden furnitures. The stores were basically big warehouses. In mid-90s, they opened their doors to the general public, which accompanied by a rising trend of DIY, skyrocketed their sales. That brought a second, smaller wave of expansion and the opening of the online store, first only with phone orders and later with a proper site. When I joined, they were doing a third shift on their business plan. They had cut down on things that weren't a big seller, like bricks and concrete, and were focusing more on the big sellers, custom-made furniture, landscaping, tools and, for some weird reason, plumbing. My first 8 months on the job was a dream. Grumpy was an excellent manager. Having started in the company roughly the same age I was and being promoted through the ranks, had developed a very distinct managerial style. His concept was simple: if my employees are happy, they work better and provide better services, which leads to better sales. That meant that while Grumpy managed one of the inner-city stores, meaning medium to small size compared to others, we were fourth in revenue nationwide and first in customer happiness. And then the reason for his nickname Stroke. While everyone called him Grumpy, a nickname he was kind of proud of, he was far from it. The reason was he had a medical condition that affected his nerves and had left him with a permanent frown on his face. He had declined promotion due to that condition, knowing the extra stress would make his condition flare up, meaning he wouldn't be as effective as he would like. His medical condition flared up unexpectedly and Grumpy had to be hospitalized and be on sick leave for a time. HQ decided to not have one of Grumpy's assistants be an acting manager for the duration, but bring in a regional manager to take over the store for the duration. Let's call him Wilhelm. Wilhelm was the exact opposite of Grumpy. He was younger than Grumpy, he was in his late 20s, Grumpy was in his late 30s, had a business degree and he hadn't worked the floor at all. He was hired from the beginning as an office drone and climbed his way to regional manager. The reason he was put in charge of our store had to do with the change of the business plan of the company. You see, the change of focus had created a lot of empty space in the stores. A supermarket chain had approached the company with an offer to rent the empty space, especially for inner-city stores. The company had accepted and placed regional managers in key stores to help with integration. The thing is, the supermarket chain had a reputation of being bad employers. That was reinforced by one of our tellers, who had worked for them for 3 years before quitting to join us. Wilhelm didn't help also. His managerial style was based in only one concept: make more money in any way possible. He started by changing our schedule from monthly to weekly, raising the sales targets to unrealistic heights and always demanded more. In the first 2 weeks, 6 experienced people had left, 4 quitted and 2 fired, and replaced by young, inexperienced people that were easier to manipulate. And then, the integration happened. The floor was the first to feel the problem. The supermarket opened its doors and was understaffed. Wilhelm started sending people over to help for 4 to 6 hours, while also demanding to work their regular shifts. If someone declined, she was written up. 2 write-ups in 6 months and you were fired. Then Wilhelm came to lay the law in the loading bay. The loading bay was shared between the 2 stores. Wilhelm declared that we had first helped the 2 guys of the supermarket unload their trucks first, because their products were perishable, and then started loading our own trucks. That would throw our delivery schedule to the wind. The loading crew worked 5 o'clock to 1300 hours. We loaded first the trucks that had longer to travel, so they will be ready to leave at 7 o'clock at the latest. The company had a next-day delivery policy for a 150 miles radius. What Wilhelm declared meant we couldn't start loading our trucks before 7:30 and they couldn't start their route before 9:30. We said as much, but Wilhelm didn't care. He said we had to do both jobs. When someone inquired about overtime, Wilhelm said no. He said we already made too much money with unsocial hours, 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and leaving early, so he wouldn't approve overtime. So, from a nice environment that you wanted to work for, we all started getting miserable. We lost 10 people in the loading crew in a month because of the new rules. The new hires didn't last long. The floor was a mess also, started turning personnel faster than a dollar hooker. Anyone who is staying is either looking for another job, is afraid of unemployment or is too young to know better. The sales had a very small decline, but customer happiness is plummeting fast. After almost 6 months, all the old guard that was left, was ready to quit. But our savior came back. Almost 6 months from the day he was hospitalized, Grumpy walks in the store to claim his rightful position. He isn't a knight in shining armor, riding a pure white horse, carrying a legendary sword. He is in a normal attire, slightly limping and holding a cane. We have a welcome back party and have a small glimmer of hope now he is back. We are informed that Grumpy will be on light duties for 2 weeks, before he becomes the manager again. Despite Grumpy being back, Wilhelm still remains the regional manager, which means he outranks Grumpy and makes it very clear in private meetings with all of us. If he caught us complaining to Grumpy, we were as good as gone. Still, a few of us are planning to have a meeting with Grumpy after the weeks, letting him get his sea legs back. But another department had other ideas. During his reign of terror, the only department that Wilhelm couldn't control was the workshop. He knew that if he treated them as bad as he did to us, they would quit and the sales would go from a small decline to bottom of the barrel real quick. As I said, custom-made furniture was the #1 seller. So, the head carpenter has a meeting with Grumpy on his second day talking about the future of the workshop. In reality, the guy spilled the beans on Wilhelm. With the pretext of catching up with the changes, Grumpy has meetings with everyone, learning what Wilhelm had done and why we had so many new staff. You could feel he was getting angrier with every meeting. He had also had an eye-opening meeting with the manager of the supermarket. Finally, the time had come that he is the manager again. The revenge. On his first day back as a manager, Grumpy notifies everyone of a mandatory meeting after the store is closed. He has a solution. So gather in the store after closing hours. And Grumpy lays out the plan. For the next couple of days, nobody except him is coming to the store. If anyone calls us, we should direct them to him. Which we did, when we started getting calls about the store being closed. Grumpy's answer to the HQ was simple: the staff was working on a second job during their shifts, which is a breach of contract, so I had to fire them all and find new staff. That caught HQ's attention, because nothing of the sort was reported in the past 6 months. They asked Grumpy for evidence, which he happily provided with our written testimonies. Which brought a shitstorm on Wilhelm. You see, Wilhelm had an arrangement with the supermarket manager. He got a kickback from our unpaid labor for the supermarket, and the manager offered the same thing to Grumpy. He also included that Wilhelm regularly declined to sign overtime, which meant that if any one of us went to the labor department, the company would get a really huge fine. The aftermath. Wilhelm quickly got fired. We all received calls to interview with the company for an open position. We all received severance pay for our firing plus most of the unpaid overtime, about 80% of it. Almost all of us went back to work with a small pay raise based on experience. The company took a long, hard look on the supermarket chain and distanced themselves from them. They stayed until their lease was over, but no shared employees anymore, and a lot of theirs jumped ship to our side. Next time Grumpy had to take time off, one of his assistants took over. 2 did a stellar job, leading to be promoted to managers in other stores. Grumpy brought back his usual managerial style, leading again to a rise of sales and customer happiness. I left the job 3 years later for a better paying position, but I still remember Grumpy as one of the best managers I ever had. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.